Welcome to the European Resilience Initiative Center video podcast now for the third time. And our guest is operator Starsky, who has joined us. Welcome to our podcast and great to see you tonight.
Hello, great to see you too. It's a pleasure.
And sorry again for this technical issue. I hope that will be the last problem of that character we have today. It is great to see that last time we saw each other. It was in middle of March, so 1.5 months ago. And we met in Berlin during a live show of European Resilience Initiative Center and Silicon Curtain podcast with Jonathan Fink. And we were discussing back then German reluctancy and the West reluctancy on supporting Ukraine and fighting Russia together with Ukraine. And since that, it seems that something has changed in the West. The United States has adopted $61 billion package for Ukraine, and Germany has supplied Ukraine with an additional Patriot battery. So the things started to move, but are they moving fast enough, or are they still pretty slow?
We have to talk about the global scale because globally Russia was preparing for this invasion. They were stockpiling their munitions, unfortunately, and whatever steps are taken now, unfortunately, it's a bit too late. We lost quite a lot of people because we didn't plan to fight, we didn't plan to invade Russia and things like that. But at the same time, over the past 4 days already, we can see that the death toll among the Russian invaders is rising. We can see that they're losing more than 1,000 men per day. Approximately 1,200 Russian invaders are being eliminated every day, which means that pretty much, yes, we already start receiving their supplies at the front line, and our defenders doing best they can to decimate the Russian, the population of Russian invaders on the Ukrainian territory.
And you're a person who is in a very special position. You have fought for Ukraine as a soldier of National Guard of Ukraine. Then you have participated in a lot of informational campaigns also in the West. You run an amazing YouTube channel which informs every day, day by day, Western audience on what is going on in Ukraine and around, and I highly recommend to subscribe to Starsky UA video channel. You have much more subscribers than we have at Eric, but still I think I dare to recommend subscribing for your channel. And you know, like how it looks like 2 years ago, over 2 years ago, nobody in Europe believed that Ukraine can hold longer than like 72 hours. I think that many of Ukrainians could not imagine that Ukraine can hold for that long a time. But at the same time, nobody could believe that Russia, after disastrous defeat in Kiev and Kharkiv Oblast, and after liberation of Kherson by Ukrainian troops, that Russia will regroup, reorganize its economy, and will meet the year 2023 practically as a newborn military power. Yes, very archaic, yes, very brutal to their own soldiers, but extremely effective in maybe not in offensive, but in defensive of what they have occupied already. You have already mentioned the lack of Western support and the reluctancy which led to this unfortunate outcome. That do you think that it was only about the delay, or also about like something else, like failed sanctions, or Russia's new allies in Iran, North Korea, etc.?
I think it was a combination of all those factors, because nobody could anticipate that Russia will be delivering munitions from Iran and North Korea. Currently, we have proofs that they already used Iranian ballistic missiles as well as North Korean ballistic missiles. Drones, yeah, it was proved quite a long time ago. The sanctions can be evaded, unfortunately, and new schemes of delivering necessary supplies for building Russian cruise and ballistic missiles, unfortunately, not unfortunately, but luckily, they are being shut down almost every month, from what we can see from the reports. And of course, Russians will keep doing whatever they can to evade those sanctions. We are not talking about the complete isolation of Russian terrorist federation. However, that could work though, because when Russians show their like full supermarkets and they say, look, your sanctions don't work, they don't really understand that the sanctions are aimed at Russian military industry, at Russian ability to produce weapons, not at everyday people's lives, and not at their ability to buy vodka in the Russian supermarkets. On the other hand, I think that would probably work, right? And probably would force Russian citizens to think about maybe their government is doing something wrong, right? But from what we know from the history, until they have what to eat, they will keep doing what they're doing, because majority uprisings took place, let's say, on the basis of hunger or starvation, голодный бунт. So those are the factors. As for the hesitation with ammunition, with the military aid to Ukraine, that was probably one of the worst things that we experienced over the past 6 months, because we've lost a lot of men, basically Avdiivka, and everybody agrees on that. Avdiivka was pretty much lost because of the hesitation caused by specific political movements in the United States.
Absolutely. I've been to Avdiivka twice in this year. Once in, okay, not in Avdiivka directly, but at the closest position where like a civilian and a foreign person can come like to the front line. We were delivering drones to the 47th Separate Mechanized Brigade, the Magura Brigade. And here I can say that the German people and other Europeans, but mostly Germany because I work in Germany, donated a lot of money and very willingly to support this brigade with drones. And we have delivered first in early January drones for about like 70,000 euro, and then in were like mostly thermal vision, night vision drones, observation drones. And in March, we have delivered for another 70,000 like light drones, FPV drones for the like observation multifunctional FPV drones for the 47th Brigade. And both times the soldiers said that from that perspective they could hold. They could hold if they could get like more equipment to fight the Russians back. And they said, okay, we can fight with like half of the artillery shells which we needed. We can fight with 20% of artillery shells because we have kamikaze drones, because we can substitute the lack of artillery shells. But of course, it was clear that if you don't have any artillery shells, then you are practically limited only to your mortar mines, which have the distance of effective fighting of about 2 kilometers, 3 kilometers, and you cannot strike the Russians deep behind the front line. And then you need to use FPV drones as the substitute for everything. And an FPV drone is practically a sniper rifle, and you can use sniper rifles when your like platoon is out of like assault rifles or machine guns, but you cannot equip the whole platoon with sniper rifles and say, okay, now you just like repel a mass attack of Zergs. And that is what happened practically for Avdiivka. But
Not only that, my friend. So the problem was Russian electronic warfare machines, because this is something that we faced in the end of the past year and beginning of this year, that Russians massively use different kinds of jammers that are efficient not only against the drones but also against guided munitions. Sometimes like HIMARS systems. So there were cases when we had acquired some really serious targets, and we had opportunity to strike them with HIMARS systems, and those missiles didn't land where they were supposed to land. There are cases when drones cannot be used, and unfortunately, good old primitive artillery is the only way to reach the target. So that's one of the concerns. This is probably the biggest problem, because there are targets that could be reached with proper artillery, and we're talking about the Western artillery that has much greater range and greater precision. Unfortunately, there were no shells, and it was the biggest challenge in the past 6 months almost.
That is what the latest report by the Center for Defense Reforms said. If I'm not mistaken, in last week report, or it was even this week, like Monday, they stated that the Excalibur guided artillery shells, which are GPS guided and are extremely precise and have caused a lot of damage for the Russian troops when they have been delivered first. I think it was early 23, if not even later 22, that they are almost ineffective now, having the precision which dropped to under 10%. By normal precision of over 70-80%, what makes them practically useless. And that is another problem. The Ukrainians have less artillery shells, and the artillery shells they have, which could have been used effectively because of their extreme precision, they cannot be used as precision ammunition. They must be used practically as mass shells, what the Russians did with their artillery shells, but the Ukrainians don't have, of course, that much shells. Do you think that the new $61 billion package by the US can solve this problem at least partly?
I think it is possible. Of course, this amount, this quantity of aid cannot be compared to, for example, Russian annual military budget, which in 2022 was approximately $70 billion. Now it's more than $80 billion in 2023. But one way or another, hopefully, we will be able to receive proper amount of weaponry, at least to close the Ukrainian sky. There are factories that are being constructed already, factories for producing artillery shells and different other munitions. Of course, it will take years to do that, but guys, we are talking about NATO countries that combined have annual GDP which is 40 times the size of Russian annual GDP, right? So I think the civilized world has all chances to defeat Russia on the territory of Ukraine, and we really hope that this support will only grow with the time, because in 2022, when all this began, we could only dream about things like HIMARS systems, Abrams tanks, Leopard tanks, Patriot systems, and things like that. Currently, we have all that. Soon we will have F-16s. Their appearance in the Ukrainian sky is absolutely imminent and expected within several weeks, according to the Ukrainian Air Force. So Russia basically stands no chance. Another thing is that Russia is spending tremendous resources on war right now, and they completely don't care about their civilian population. We saw the disaster in Orenburg, where the dam was destroyed by itself. Russians blamed beavers. And we will see more of that because great amount of resources that were used to upkeep Russian infrastructure are being brought, to the Russian military industry to build missiles to kill Ukrainians, but it cannot last like that.
We can definitely, and we will definitely come to this topic of how Russian government treats its own citizens and how the Russian people see this situation from their perspective. Why are they so willingly sacrifice themselves in mass numbers in Ukraine for what? But before we go to that topic and to other topics with Operator Starsky, who is our guest, don't forget to like, to share, to subscribe to this channel. You have a subscription button in the left of that screen. Like, click the square place with Eric logo and subscribe to this channel if you have not yet. And we also have, before we go to all this question of complicated relationships between the Russian people and the Russian government, I have a question from our reader, Dr. Dick Dawson, and I need to say that Dick Dawson was a person who extremely helped us with technical issues with this live stream. If not he, I would have never be able to arrange this stream. Thank you, Dick. And he asks, are the shells weapons coming the ones needed most? Are Ukrainian needs being prioritized properly?
Of course, Ukrainian needs are being prioritized properly, but at the same time, there is a big question of logistics because Russians can target our logistics located in the western Ukraine and deep in the rear. So what I can tell is that, again, considering Russian increased losses over the past 4 days, which we can observe, the most needed things are being delivered to our guys at the front. And I do really expect that the air defense is being delivered as well to protect the peaceful cities. Of course, we will see the efficiency of this of those supplies. I'm talking about the anti-air defense, probably in the nearest future, because Russians are planning another massive missile strike. There's approximately 10 Russian bombers prepared to take off at all times. This is what we see. So we are expecting another missile strike in the nearest future, and we will see whether those air defense and munitions are effective or not.
Yes, and this is exactly what is happening, practically what is happening with the delivery of the Taurus missiles by Germany, or not delivery of Taurus missiles by Germany. That is what the Ukrainians asked from Germany all the time, together with air defense systems. And what we have, after all, Chancellor Olaf Scholz, after months and months of discussion, graciously delivered one Patriot battery. Yes, okay, Germany is the largest deliverer of Patriot batteries. We have delivered 3 of them. But still, Germany has 12, and why do we need them when all the Russian missiles are being fired against Ukraine now? And regarding the Taurus missiles, he just keeps saying no. No missiles, no nothing, nothing will be delivered. And that is the question. What is happening with the German military support? Where are all the promised Leopard? Where are all the promised Martyrs, etc.? It is in interest of Germany to stop Russia in Ukraine because we will be the next militarily or non-militarily. What do you think? Why is the German society more hawkish than the German government? We see that according to the polls, the Germans are more willing to support Ukraine with highly effective weapons than the Chancellor seems to be.
Because it's always like that. You can always count on common people, which majority of them is absolutely decent and amazing. Politicians is a different topic. Okay. Speaking of patriots, of course, one patriot will greatly increase our capabilities of intercepting Russian missiles. But at the same time, Ukraine consists of 25 oblasts. Each oblast has a major city the size of Chicago or Washington, D.C., just so people could understand, or Philadelphia, right?
Frankfurt, or even Munich, like Kharkiv has the size of Hamburg or Munich.
I would say that Kharkiv is probably even bigger than Hamburg. And the problem with that is we're talking about vast territory, second largest country in the Europe, and all of those cities require protection, including smaller cities as well, because we have thousands of different cities and towns and villages. People cannot really comprehend the sheer scale of Ukraine on the map. It's huge. And 2, 3, 4 Patriot systems, they are useful, but they will not help to intercept all of the missiles flying at Ukraine. We will see damage. We will see casualties among civilians. Russians understand the approximate index of the missiles that we are able to intercept, which is approximately 75%. And they know that even though like 3/4 of missiles will be intercepted, but still one missile is enough to destroy a power plant, for example, or 2 missiles. They're completely enough to destroy a power plant. And they also use hundreds of drones together with missile strikes. And they also use gliding bombs on the eastern front and more, over the eastern territories during the missile strikes, and also other types of aviation missiles launched by Su-34, Su-35. So we need much more air defense than that. One Patriot system is enough to save several lives, but lives will still be lost. So there were estimations that we need between 7 and 22 additional Patriot systems in order to be able to protect whole territory of Ukraine. At the same time, there are hundreds of anti-air systems, not only Patriots, but also Hawk systems, NASAMS, that are absolutely not used. They are stored in different military bases, in different storages, in the Middle East, of course. They are not used. And of course, Ukrainians could put them to the good use, I think. As for the hesitation of Mr. Scholz, unfortunately, I don't know him personally. I don't know what kind of reasons he has not to deliver Taurus missiles to Ukraine. But one thing is absolutely obvious: if you want to deliver those missiles, you will be looking for opportunity to do that. And if you don't want to do that, you will be bringing new reasons to justify you not delivering those missiles to Ukraine. And that's exactly what we see today. The rhetorics are absolutely great, about the need to protect Ukraine and things like that. But it's not only about protection of Ukraine, it's about helping Ukraine to win this war. And the victory for Ukraine is returning our territories and pushing the invaders out of our territory. So this is something we should all consider. Again, I don't know what kind of reasons Mr. Scholz has, but apparently he does. Apparently he has some.
Yes, there are, of course, the ideas that Chancellor Scholz hopes to restore some sort of relations with Russia after this war ends, and he wants to ensure the positions of German companies in Russia, which is a strange interest, of course, but can one of those which can be can be important for him. Also, there are the coming elections in Germany. First, the European Parliament elections in June this year, but first and foremost, the parliamentary elections in September next year, where Chancellor Scholz and his party obviously want to present themselves as a party of peace, party of very balanced and responsible decisions, not the warmonger like the other parties who demand more weapons, but the party which ended the war, and that can be one of motives behind his ideas. By the way, people ask here if you are you happy to be here because you look like you've been forced to come here, and you are not happy to be here. I hope that you have not been forced to come here, but you may ask the audience if it is true or not.
I can say that, of course, I'm happy to be here because, my choice to come to Germany was dictated.
No. Here at our channel.
Yeah. Of course, I'm happy because it was a great pleasure to see you in Berlin last time we had such opportunity. It's always a pleasure to stream with you. Yeah, and
you have confirmed now that you're here on your free will, and audience can be sure. Look, operator Starsky has confirmed he was not forced to come to this event. And
no. It's really hard to force Starsky unless you promise me some I don't know, yummies, sushi, something like that,
or instant victory over Russia. But when we come to the serious topics and to some sort of extent to sad topics, we know that the problem with the German attitude to the war, and I mean on the German attitude, the attitude of our government, and first of all, and first and foremost, Chancellor Scholz, is that it is not recommended, or it is not allowed, even with the German weapons, to hit the sovereign territory of Russia. And we know that the Russians know it as well, and we know that the Russians have constructed almost already a new airfield just 40 kilometers from the border to Ukraine, close to Kharkiv region, obviously to have more convenient starting positions for bombing Kharkiv. We know that the Russians are constructing a railway along the shore of the Sea of Azov, using the opportunity to have a carriage bridge now, but maybe they think that one day attacks will destroy the carriage bridge, and for that time they have the railway. And maybe that moment, the Taurus missiles will be delivered because Olaf Scholz will say, "Oh, no way, like no problem. Destruction of Kerch Bridge is not a problem anymore. So I can deliver Taurus and say, look, Taurus delivery hasn't helped." But when we talk about the hits on Russian sovereign territory, most Western partners opposing that. Even when Ukraine hates Russian oil refineries with Ukraine-produced drones. What is the problem here? Why is Russia's sovereign territory so sacred?
When we're talking about a fuel, it's because on the West there are specific politicians that are afraid that the fuel prices will rise in the face of the American elections upcoming. And that is one of the reasons. Another reason is I'm talking about striking Russian oil refineries. Another reason, apparently, people are still afraid of, nuclear escalation because Putin actually uses nuclear weapons absolutely properly. They were not designed to kill; they were designed to scare people, right? And this is exactly how he uses those weapons nowadays on the TV, in the social media. We can see all kinds of Russian hosts discussing, using weapons against European cities, which most probably means that they will not be used whatsoever. But again, this is the proper use of nuclear weapons, and this is how they were designed to be used to scare people, to inflict terror in people's minds and hearts. So that's apparently another reason. As for Olaf Scholz and his political power, I believe that if he wants to truly become a politician and leader fighting for peace, he must do all he can to help Ukraine win this war, because Ukrainians want peace as well. We don't want to surrender. We don't want to die. We do want peace. That's why we're fighting so hard every day.
And that is what the Ukrainians are doing on the constant bombing and shelling. Tonight, Nova Poshta, a post-delivery service warehouse in Odessa, has been hit by ballistic missiles. Yesterday, a vivid walking route in Odessa, once again along the seashore, has been hit by Russian ballistic missiles with cluster munition. So the Russians deliberately hit with a ballistic missile with cluster munition a populated civilian area where people walk with their dogs, where people spend time with their kids, where people are jogging, just to terrorize the Ukrainians. And that is what is happening all the time in Ukraine, while the Ukrainians are being deprived of long-range missiles like Taurus, and when delivered, missiles like Storm Shadow or Scalp. Great thing. Nobody says that they're not good. They are amazing. They do their job. But the Ukrainians are not allowed to use these missiles to hit the launching pads on the sovereign territory of Russia. But we have discussed already, and I promised to address this topic later in our conversation, the case of very strange codependency between the Russian citizens and the Russian state. Like, Vladimir Putin is not a person you would love to have as your boss. He's a notorious liar, he's cruel, he doesn't care when you die, he doesn't care when you suffer, he always tells lies, he never openly talks about his reasons. Nobody knows anything about his private life. One knows he steals money, but which is much worse, he kills people abroad and in his own country. Still, the Russians seem to stay behind him and have already sacrificed almost 500,000 of own soldiers in this colonial genocidal war against Ukraine. I'm not talking here about the suffering of the Ukrainians, which they have brought with them to Ukraine: mass rape, kidnapping, torture, looting, executions, everything. But I'm talking now only about almost 500,000 dead Russian soldiers, someone's brothers, sons, husbands. Russians seem not to care about it. What is going on with that?
I would like to add here that Putin is not only a maniac and liar, he's also wearing high heels. Which, I really don't care about this. Like, fashion is a very personal thing for everybody, but we know the reason why he's wearing high
Yeah,
heels.
but look, if a person, for example, I was wearing once high heels, but I never hid it. Like I wear it open as like a part of a party.
Yeah,
And
but it's not.
he's hiding that. He pretends he does not. So it shows that he has like some really deep sitting like issues with his head.
Yeah, I think his height is like his biggest complex. It's obvious. I mean, like, I think we should, bring this information to Russians more, more of this, because considering that Russian society is highly and extremely homophobic, that they would not like the fact that their chief is wearing high heels. But returning to the topic, the reason Russians do that is basically because Russian life in Russia is like a horror movie. Okay, Google Russian street, watch photos, and you will understand what I'm talking about. Going to Ukraine is their opportunity to go to a foreign country to explore, right? To do whatever they like, because Russians are given this pardon to do anything, rape, loot, and basically this is the foundation of the Russian propaganda, like Russian recruitment campaign. They basically tell people that if you go to Ukraine, you can return as a really, really rich person. You can take anything you like. You can do whatever you like. You can rape and loot and basically be yourself, be a Russian citizen.
But that is what the Soviet army did in Germany back then. We know there were these postage package limits for the soldiers, sergeants, officers, and higher officers, and depending on your military rank, you could send like every month, like starting from 3 and maybe up to 50 kilogram back to the Soviet Union. And back then, one needs to think the looting goods were not that huge and heavy. What can you send back home? Maybe like some nice cutlery, or maybe watches, or maybe something else. And today the Russians, they have like not reinvented, they have revived the same tradition. We know that in the first weeks of the full-scale invasion, the Russian post service opened a special postage points, postage offices in Belarus, close to Ukraine's border, where they allowed soldiers to send back home up to 200 kilos of package per month. And one asks, okay, what is 200 kilo? Why does a soldier need to send 200 kilo for free back home? So maybe there were like some washing machines they were sending. And that was well known for the Russian military commanders, and they have installed it in cooperation with Russian state postal service. I asked myself, why wasn't Russian post service being sanctioned for this clearly participation in the worst looting in the history of 21st century?
Yeah, it's a great question. 200 kilos from Ukraine is basically a fridge, a washing machine, a toilet, and a conditioner. And if you're lucky, you can find some computer or like a TV screen. Guys, it's from life, because we also the footage, the CCTV footage of Russians in Belarus sending their loot taken in Kyiv Oblast back to Russia. And this is fact. Unfortunately, we are facing absolutely barbaric invaders, right? I would not even say that they revived this tradition of looting, because history doesn't know cases when Russian invaders didn't do that. Like, they are known for this. So it's a very, very disturbing picture, and people must understand one thing: if Ukraine falls to the Russian invaders, this is exactly what they will see in their countries in Europe.
But that is what bothers me and frightens me a lot. This understanding that Putin's regime is a criminal regime, which is an aggressive imperialistic regime with wild fantasies about world dominance, seems to be more or less accepted already in the West. But the idea about how much this toxicity is being spread within the heads of the Russian citizens, I think it is by far not accepted yet. And during the last weeks, we had like two cases in Germany when Ukrainian refugees in one case and Ukrainian soldiers in another case have been brutally killed, both time by Russian citizens. One time it was a brutal murder on a Ukrainian mother and a Ukrainian grandmother, the same family, by a German-Russian couple with the goal to kidnap their baby. Both women from Ukraine have been brutally killed and their bodies have been dumped into a river. Police has found the baby and rescued the baby. The suspected murderers have been arrested. And another case happened just last week when a Russian citizen has stabbed to death two Ukrainian soldiers who spent their time in Germany being treated in a hospital after they have been wounded in Ukraine. And many people of Ukrainian heritage who are in Germany, they ask themselves now how safe they are and how large is the danger. What can you tell about that?
I can tell a lot about that. Unfortunately, yes, we all heard those news about soldiers and absolutely horrible tragedy that happened with the mother and grandmother. Their newborn was kidnapped and they were murdered by this Russian-German couple. It's absolutely insane, but it's not the whole picture. It's just top of the iceberg, because, for example, in Ukraine, it's really, really hard, just walking on the street to meet a Kadyrovite, for example, right? They usually don't populate Ukrainian controlled territory, while in Europe it's absolutely possible, unfortunately. So the danger is coming not only from brainwashed Russians, whatever Russians they are, French Russians, German Russians, but also from, let's say, people who have experience in killing other people. I'm talking about the Russian people, Russian soldiers, Russian terrorists. And again, this is something that we have to consider. Yes, Ukrainian refugees are unfortunately in danger in Europe. There are cases of bullying, there are cases of harassment. If you have a car with Ukrainian registration plates, you gotta prepare, because if you don't have a garage, you will definitely see signs, of Russian presence in your district by looking at your car eventually. So there are such cases. This is what we see. Can we do anything? Well, Ukrainians are behaving according to local legislation. Of course, we're not gonna walk, around the city with, self-defense groups armed with like baseball bats. But governments should do something to protect Ukrainian refugees in this case, because this is, those murders that we saw in Germany, they are a concerning trend, unfortunately.
That is exactly what wondered me once. Like I was participating at a demonstration, pro-Ukrainian demonstration in Berlin, and we have found that like some people who were pro-Ukrainian demonstration, they were wearing like so-called Saint ribbons or St. George ribbons, which are in Germany not forbidden completely, but as they are a sign of Russian imperialistic policy against Ukraine and were used as a symbol of Russian invading troops, they are banned in Berlin in a context of Ukrainian events. Like if you appear in a street with St. George ribbon in Germany, it's not a criminal offense. I'm really sorry that it is not, but that is the German law, very like hypocritical, I would say. But if you appear with this ribbon at a pro-Ukrainian rally, you make yourself liable because in that context it is forbidden. Once again, pretty hypocritical, but that's what we have. And when I personally and another person, Ukrainian, appeared to a policeman, like approached the policeman and asked the policeman to fill a report about that offense, we were just rejected. And then like the explanations were really ridiculous, and we had to wait and to fight for our right and said we really wanted to be registered, and then the policeman started to tell the story, or it will bring nothing, we will not find the person, and there is no violence involved, etc. But what is the effective result? The effective result is that this event doesn't go into the statistics. And when next week or next month the Ukrainian community will address Berlin City Hall and say, look, we feel unsafe, the City Hall will say, look, we don't have any statistic about Russia originating attacks on Ukraine. And that's why there are no reasons for you to believe that you are threatened. Is this something what you experience and your friends experience when you communicate with the German police or German authorities?
I didn't have much chance to communicate with German police yet.
Thanks God.
Yeah, but I have friends in countries like Austria, for example, and they reported that there were cases of harassment and bullying and vandalizing their property by Russians, obviously. So it's really hard to tell what exactly we should expect from the government, what kind of next steps. But I'm sure that we have to talk about it, and we should never, let Russian provokers or Russian bullies go unpunished. Because if the government closes eyes on that, sooner or later we will face not only Russians, like local Russians, bullying other people, but we will see like former Wagnerites, going to European cities for a vacation. And that will be much more dangerous. That's why we have to act now, I believe.
Indeed, and we know that even in the case of the Wagnerites, we had pretty strange situations of even cooperation between some representatives of the German state and the Wagner and the Kadyrovtsi, who are, as we know, pretty close to the Wagnerites. We had at least one case in Bavaria when the whereabouts of a Chechen refugee who was hunted by Kadyrovtsi was revealed to Kadyrovtsi by an employee of German It's not a police, it's an institution for protection of the constitution, practically a police which cares only about terrorism or other serious threats. And his identity and his whereabouts was revealed to Kadyrovtsi, which endangered his life, of course, dramatically. And it happened just last year, so we don't know what is happening behind the closed doors and how much the German authorities are being infiltrated by at least supporters of Putin's regime. We know that 2 weeks ago, two Russian German citizens have been arrested in Germany, in Bavaria. Obviously, they were cooperating with Russian FSB intelligence and were preparing terrorist attacks on military infrastructure in Bavaria, and in particular military infrastructure which was used for training of Ukrainian soldiers. And we know that the politicians, even high-rank politicians within, for example, the far-right party IFD, have been accused recently in receiving money from the Russian embassy directly, which also raises questions how much of German politicians who are not in the government of any region yet, but still have over 30% of support in certain regions, how much connections they have to Moscow, and how much they are being guided by Moscow. But when we come back to these strange relations between the German elites and Russia, another case which really wonders me recently is the case of Yulia Navalny. Yulia Navalny, the widow of Russian oppositional leader Alexei Navalny. And Yulia Navalny is quite a name now in Germany. She held her speech in front of the European Parliament. She has her foundation being active in Berlin. And she's absolutely welcomed in Germany as a person who uh, incarnates in the eyes of many German politicians the spirit of free, democratic future Russia. That's what the Navalnyists call marvelous Russia of the future. And at the same time, if you look at her statements, she almost never speaks about Ukraine. And when she speaks about Ukraine, for example, her speech in front of the European Parliament was about that arms deliveries to Ukraine never helped, sanctions against Russia never helped. That is why the West must find another way, and guess what? To fund Navalny Foundation to run a YouTube channel to address Russians, to inform them better so they overthrow Vladimir Putin. What do you think about this wonderful plan?
I would like to call our viewers to Google Washington Post Navalny 2017, calling Ukrainian allies on the West not to send military aid to Ukraine. It was prior to the invasion, and they will find an interesting article about this. Mrs. Navalny is not the person that can be a good political leader, I believe, even though she had, okay, let's call Navalny like a legendary person, right? Because he was well known and he died for his views and things like that. But she is not a leader. Apparently, there are people behind her trying to use her image. This is just my personal opinion, you know. The messages that she's sending to Russians living in Russia and in European cities, they are completely ridiculous. Like during the elections of Putin, she called people to just walk out, stand on the streets for a while, and then go home. And
but that is very comfortable. Like you have a feeling you have protested, you have done everything you could, and then you go home. So
Yeah,
that is
absolutely. Absolutely. Unfortunately, they never spoke anything. And if you don't speak, somebody will speak instead of you. And what people don't understand is that when all those Russians went on the streets and were standing there silently, it was beneficial for Russian propagandists who brought cameras and said, look how many people went to support Putin. People don't understand this, but this is exactly what happened because unlike Yulia Navalny, unfortunately, Russian propagandists have big experience in doing such informational things. So um, of course, I feel really, really sorry for her loss. Despite the fact that Ukrainians generally don't support Navalny for everything he said about Ukraine, uh, but of course, nobody deserves to die like him. Die in prison, killed by a terrorist Putinist regime. Uh, but at the same time, I don't see her as a strong leader, as a face of democratic Russia. If you want to see face of democratic Russia, you got to see the faces of members of the Russian Voluntary Corps, Russian leader, Russian Legion, Freedom for Russia, Russian Siberian Battalion, fighting in Ukraine against the Russian invaders because they actually do something worthy, unlike the liberal Russian opposition that you can see anywhere around Europe.
indeed, and of course, I fully agree with you. What happened to Alexei Navalny was brutal, illegal, criminal, and nobody deserves to die in a prison after months of treatment, which can be called torture without any overextension. It was real full-scale torture what happened to him, and he was killed after that. Even if he died, like on some causes, his death was a murder, and that was a murder ordered by Vladimir Putin, of course. But that is what you pointed out is very important. That what is the future Russia? What Navalny is, and Navalny is more than a person who has been killed. Navalny is a sort of ideology. It's an idea, and Navalny's anti-corruption foundation is what we observe in a long history. Like even under Navalny, who was free back then, like when he was in Berlin or before in Russia or before his poisoning or after he was imprisoned in Russia. The whole idea was that the corruption is the root of all evil, and the corruption is also the result of all evil. And they started to fight Russian corruption. From my perspective, we should support corruption in Russia's army. And when the Russian generals steal the money to buy property in Europe, okay, it's not fair that they have this property, but it's better than this money goes into production of tanks. And Navalny Foundation fought against that corruption. We all remember their investigation who steals money in missiles industry. And voila, what we have now, Russia's missiles industry is effective that much that the Russians produce more missiles than the West interceptor missiles. And the result we see every day on the streets, in the streets of Ukrainian cities.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree on that more than 100%. Also, the Russian case is very bad. It's very bad because Russia is a country with centuries of repressive traditions, not just traditions, but with perfect mechanism for repressing people like Navalny, other oppositionist leaders, and that's the reason why nowadays oppositionist leaders of Russia are sitting in Europe, right, and making money on a YouTube, like Max Katz, for example. I, I have reasons to like this person, but the only effective way, again, is the way that is used by people from Legion Freedom for Russia, because they're fighting. So the problem is the problem with Navalny and their ideology is, and I'm talking about this as a participant of Revolution of Dignity in Ukraine, is that in a country where democracy doesn't work, the democratic protests will not work either. And peaceful, soft power, whatever measures are taken by the oppositionists, they will not work, because when you go outside with a banner, you are getting arrested and killed, and you die in the prison, or you get assassinated. So we learned this in Ukraine, and in Ukraine we had to sacrifice. Unfortunately, there were people who were killed for our freedom, but we learned this, that in case your government or your regime doesn't support democracy, and even more than that, despises democracy, despises democratic protests, despises democratic meetings and things like that, and of course despises the foundation of democracy, which is free democratic elections, right? I'm talking about former Ukrainian dictator Yanukovych, who forged elections twice. In this case, your democratic measures, methods, tools will never work. That's why one of the reasons, I hate to say this, unfortunately, I don't want to sound cynical, but the reason Navalny is dead is partially because his methods didn't work. He had to think about something else, and because they lost so much time and so much opportunities, this in the end led to his death. I hope Russians will wake up, people who can think, right? They will wake up and they will realize that the only way to eliminate Putin and his regime is to actually fight. This is what we see happening in such military battalions, right? Let's call them military forces, because we're talking about Legion Freedom for Russia and Russian Voluntary Corps and Siberian Battalion and other Russian partisans fighting on the territory of Russia against the Putinist regime. This is the only way. Everything else was tested. It didn't work. Let's just admit it. But then people like Max Katz, they go, we should never listen to Ukrainian experience because it's not relevant. We know better what to do. And in the end, Ukraine is a free democratic country. Of course, we're attacked and we're fighting for our survival, but as a democratic country. And Max Katz is receiving a refuge in Europe.
Indeed, and we know that there are like all type of excuses why things didn't work well, or quite the opposite, the denial of reality. Like just think about the last programmatic letter of Navalny from his prison, where he described the strategies of fight for the Russian opposition. And he said, yes, our so-called like clever or smart voting process worked perfectly. We have pushed United Russia, Kremlin Party, out of so many city halls and regional governments. Yes, you have. You have inspired your voters to vote for the communists or for the Zhirinovsky Party to dilute the majority of Kremlin's party, but did it bring any result? The communists and the Zhirinovsky far-right party supported the war against Ukraine exactly to the extent as the Putin's party did. So, and what is the most tragic is, of course, that while Putin was killing Alexei Navalny for over 2 years in prison, we have not seen almost any protest in Russia against this long time announced murder. And that is, I think, the largest tragedy for Alexei Navalny. He was killed slowly in prison while his supporters just created another YouTube channel in the West,
Yeah.
or supported the idea to lift sanctions against Mikhail Friedman, a pro-Putin oligarch. That is what we see. But I wanted to switch to another topic, and it is not related directly to Russo-Ukrainian war, but it is what we are observing now in Georgia, where hundreds of thousands of people are protesting against their government, which is obviously um, very effectively being controlled by Russia. And what we will see here, we will see something like we saw in Belarus, hundreds of thousands of protests, a lot of inspiration, but then consolidation of the authoritarian regime and crackdown on the opposition. Or we see something what we saw in Ukraine during 2013-14 Maidan, when people took the country in their hands and kicked out a corrupt pro-Russian President Yanukovych.
I'm not a really good prophet, but I would really like to see the protests being successful. Knowing our Georgian brothers and sisters, without disrespect towards those people, but they are known for such protests like every decade. Ukrainians are the same, because in the end, this is how democracy is built, right? It's not using books, but it's through fighting for your rights and your freedoms. Books too, by the way. So I do believe that they will be successful. Russian influence in Georgia, even though it's strong, but the support of this influence of pro-Russian agents, pro-Russian influencers there, is weakened by the fact that Russia is throwing most of resources at fighting Ukraine. So I think they have all chances to be successful, and I will be rooting for them and hoping that those guys will succeed.
Yeah, and we have seen it already, like on the streets, in the streets of Tbilisi, like brave people protesting against the government and fighting against the water cannons and police batons and all the brutality. Like some deputies of oppositional parties at the Georgian government have been kidnapped and brutally beaten. But of course, the question comes every time. Will the protesters take over the governmental buildings and be supported also by some of the parties in the parliament, which provides them with not only with legitimacy, they are of course legitimate as the people, because the power comes from the people, but provide them with the tools, effective tools of impact and change the decisions of the authorities of the government. And that is, of course, an open question. But we know that Russia had all its interests in Georgia and has occupied over 20% of the Georgian territory. And that is a sort of this slow expanding occupation. We know that the Russians moved a bit this barbed wire, illegal border between what they called South Ossetia, Republic of South Ossetia, and they moved it inside the Georgian governmental controlled territories. And that is actually what they did all the time in Russia-occupied Donbass. Step by step, expanding and then checking the ground, if it works, if it doesn't work. And we have all this development, not only there, we have it in Transnistria, in Moldova, we have it in Armenia, where the Russians had their military base. What is it about for what is the Putin's or Russia's dream? Is it reestablishment of the Russian Empire, of the Soviet Union? Where do Russia's hunger gets satisfied, or there is no satisfaction for it?
In order to understand this, we should, of course, listen to Putin's statements, which he already admitted that he considers It was a speech, I believe, in 2021. He considers the collapse of the Soviet Union the biggest tragedy of the 20th century. And we should also probably listen to individuals like Dugin with his idea of Russian supremacy and Ruski Mir and things like that. So basically, they have all excuses to dominate the world. And of course, all kinds of Russian so-called anchors on a television who say that there is absolutely no limits for Russian interests. Not only anchors, the Patriarch Kirill actually said that. The former KGB spy, he said that there are no limits for the Russian interests, and Russian interests are bigger than current Russian territory. It was when they, it was the recent meeting when they basically proclaimed holy war against West. So we have a big problem. First of all, there are former countries that were occupied by the USSR, and now we can see that current rulers of Russia want to reunite the evil empire of USSR, and we also have massive amount of proofs that they want to destabilize Western world because they hate it so much. I don't know what some people on the West, in America, for example, there are people in Germany who say, but we have to speak to Russians. The problem is that Putin is being demonized. And actually, they're good guys. And if we spoke to them instead of threatening them and stuff like that, they would be like grateful and they would be our friends. Russians don't remember good things. Bush legs, Noshki Busha, you know what I'm talking about. They freaking saved Russia from starvation in the 90s.
I remember that
Yeah.
that period. It was like the later 90s or mid 90s, and there were these like 20-kilo packages of frozen legs of chicken, frozen chicken legs, which have been delivered like to Russia back then. And that was like, for me as a teenager, it was the main source of proteins.
Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
I ate like for months, like nothing of protein except of this frozen chicken meat, which was sent like from the US. And you
Some people in the United States, they still remember those days when they like helped to package aid for their Russian friends, right? And the response that they have now is that Russia is threatening to freaking take Alaska, because Alaska is naturally Russian land, right? Illegally taken from the Russian Empire. I'm not kidding. 2 years ago, I was joking about it. I was joking that because Native Americans and people living in places like Chukotka, they are genetically related. Because of migration processes and stuff like that, in the days when Alaska was connected to Russia, like thousands of years ago. So Russians can say that Native Americans are basically Russian people, and and because they are being repressed, Russia has all rights to go and liberate those people, like they did with the people of Donbass, which never existed. They were always Ukrainian. But literally last year, I've heard Russians speaking about it. I couldn't believe my freaking ears.
Yeah, and like it is. We know this all like Russian, like the Russians, like they make jokes about the import, but you never know when they're joking, when they're not. And I can tell you because I was born in Russia and I was raised in Russia, and I was a part of that mindset as well. Because when you grew up in that society, you cannot see anything except that society, and it is what like forms you naturally. And it took me years to get rid of that imperialistic illusions and years of living abroad, far from Russia. And I remember until now, like when my conversation recently to my good Ukrainian friend, and he said, "Look, I was thinking all the time that the Russians make joke because I met once like a friend of mine who is Russian, and I asked him like some 10 days ago, okay, when you will come as a guest, like there is like oh there is a train connection, a flight connection from your city." And he told me, "Oh, we don't need trains or planes. We can come on tanks anytime." And then the Ukrainian friend said, "Okay." Back then I thought, "Oh, what a silly joke." But after some years, I realized maybe it was not only a joke. Maybe there was something besides. And then I tell this Ukrainian friend of mine, of course it was not a joke. Of course it was meant. Of course not in the meaning that tomorrow I conscript and I go with the army. But this option is never to be excluded. And we know that the Russian propaganda said for years and decades to Russians that every city in Europe which has once been occupied by Russian army is legally a part of Russia, or at least Russia has claims on that city. Berlin was occupied like 2 times. Why not take Berlin? Paris was occupied once in 1814. Of course, it was an occupation together with Austrian and Prussian military alliance, but we have been there once. Why not come there again? Alaska, Fort Elizabeth on Hawaii Islands. Everything can be Russia if your imagination is brave enough. The same what is happening with Africa. The Wagnerites go to Africa, to Central African Republic, also because they believe they have claims on Africa, because, oh yeah, like Russians, like Soviet military advisors spend their time in Angola. Like Africa belongs to us, we have always been here, and they don't question it. Every single region, every single city where a Russian soldier once spent a night is in their mind is a potential territory of Russian Federation. And of course that works for Ukraine. I remember the propaganda posters which the Russians posted in Kherson. They posted in Kherson a propaganda poster with Alexander Pushkin. And Alexander Pushkin with his quote from one of his letters, in which Kherson, who was in Kherson only for 1 day, right in transit in his exile to Russia-occupied Moldova, and Pushkin wrote in his letter to his friend that I visited Kherson and my great-grandfather was once an officer under Peter I here, and do you know, they still remember his name and fear his name. And the Russians put this quote on the propaganda posters, using it as a claim that Kherson was always a part of Russian Empire. And that is how they work.
Yeah, it's crazy. There is one myth that people unfortunately believe in, and they believe that there must be a way to reach Russian people in Russia and bring them the truth and tell them, guys, first of all, there's no Nazi in Ukraine. Second of all, Ukraine was not gonna invade you. NATO is not gonna invade you. If you behave normally and become like normal democratic people, friendly and open and stuff, we can be good friends and partners. They believe that vast majority of Russians are brainwashed into, believing Putin's lies. So the problem is they know everything well. They know that they invaded territory. They know that they are eliminating Ukrainian identity that they hate so much. They know everything, and bringing them the truth will not change anything. Unfortunately, there must be other approaches to this. But remember when Putin had this press conference with so-called Russian mothers at this ridiculous staged event, and one of the journalists asked Putin what was the achievement of the special military operation, and he said, well, look at the map, you see new territories, well, that's the achievement. And he didn't even blink an eye. He actually said what everybody knows in Russia. They are annexing territories because they are invaders, and they are proud of that.
Yes, it is, and that is they never hide it. Like that is, like it's a bit like complicated for me to speak on this war against Ukraine because I'm a Russian-born person and I'm a German citizen. So practically my motherland by birth and my motherland by choice attacked Ukraine not once, many times, and tried to erase Ukraine and the Ukrainians as a nation. So I I have nowhere to hide and say, oh, we are good guys. We are not. And at the same time, like when we talk about this comparison of the Russian and the German way of dealing with things, or with the crimes, with war crimes, unspeakable crimes, I still can judge, I think, the difference because I know them a bit. And while the German defense strategy after the World War II was we knew nothing, we had no idea. We never knew what happened to Jews. They just disappeared somewhere. Like, keine Ahnung. And if we had known, of course we had protested. And after like a certain amount of years, there came another stage, like we all were in resilience. Like my grandfather was anti-fascist. He was a good friend of Colonel von Stauffenberg, was always against Hitler. He hid Jews in his cellar, was always against the Nazi Party. And the last stage is, but we have worked on our history and now we are different, which is true by a certain extent. And of course, Germany is a democracy and an open society with all its flaws, but you cannot compare modern Germany to any autocracy or dictatorship, especially to the Nazi Reich. But that is also a protection mechanism. So we can now forget about our past because we have worked on it enough and we are good enough to teach everything how to be good guys. And in Russia, it's quite the opposite. They don't pretend they don't know. They say, we know and it's good. Or at the top, we know, but everyone is doing that. So they don't even try to hide in that, under that camouflage, or it's terrible, but we had no idea, or at least we tried to fight against it. Maybe it will come like one day. But nowadays, they clearly sign, openly say, yes, we know that we bomb Ukrainian cities and we want to bomb them more intensively. Yes, we know that we execute Ukrainian prisoners of war, and that is what they deserve. And we can do it even more. So they don't hide, and even Vladimir Putin, who is not a stupid person, he delivered on TV a confession that he's committing genocide according to UN Convention on Prevention of Genocide when he was speaking to his children ombudsman Maria Lvova Belova and directly ordered her to kidnap Ukrainian children and bring them to Russia. That was the only reason why he has got an arrest warrant from International Criminal Court, because he has confessed on his own state-owned TV. And that is, I think, is the very substantial, significant difference between the Russian way of committing war crimes and the German way of committing war crimes. And that is maybe the most frightening thing which I have ever seen in my life, when a person is sitting again in front of you and just defending genocide.
It's very scary, and that's like the biggest difference between Germans and Russians is that after the World War II, Germans were brave enough to face the shame and to accept this shame and do all they could to change, which now they can be proud of, because they turned from the most hated nation in the Europe to like one of the most powerful, most strong industrial and economically nations. And there's a lot of other people who envy Germans because of that. But the only way it was possible was because they accepted this shame. Russians are not capable of doing that. Not all of them. There is small minority of people who can say, I am ashamed of what my country is doing to Ukraine. I admit our responsibility, and I'm calling my authorities to stop this madness, because I support democratic world and peace and freedoms. I don't support genocide. But there's of course, Russians are different. There are Russians living in Europe, for example, who go like, let's make a selfie. Let's make a selfie, because if Russian and Ukrainian makes a selfie, it will mean that, despite all the things, we can still be friends and shit.
And
It's
of
a
course,
wrong.
you need to prepare like a graffiti for a wall when a Ukrainian girl and a Russian girl with their
Yeah,
flags hug each other, and it will be a sign of remaining humans in this terrible world.
yeah, absolutely. But they miss one thing. Before even coming close to Ukrainian, the Russian must say following words: I'm really freaking sorry for what my country is doing to your country. Please accept my apology, because we feel responsible for this genocide. And this is the only possible way we can communicate somehow. Because, it feels so weird. We got invaded and we are the one warmongers. What the hell? But in the end of the day, this is exactly how Russian propaganda works. But it's not just about propaganda. It's about proper human qualities. If you can accept that you are wrong, then we can work together. Okay, we can coexist together. But if you don't care about that, if you feel that, I lived in I don't know, Mukhasransk my whole life, I didn't vote for Putin, it's not my responsibility. It freaking is. Just admit it and make a choice.
No, and of course, from the German side, they come pretty often the words or ideas like, "Oh, but they are also victims of Putin's regime. Look, they cannot demonstrate. They can be arrested. It's Putin who causes all the problems." But wait, it's not Putin who rapes Ukrainians, who kills Ukrainians, who tortures Ukrainians. Of course, there is like Russian opposition who are anti-Putin, but we have already discussed it. How many of these anti-Putin Russian opposition leaders are ready to accept ideas of, for example, Russia paying compensations for Ukraine for what Russia has done, or delivering Russian war criminals to the International Criminal Court, or reducing Russia's sovereignty on other areas like denuclearization of Russia, reducing Russian army, or creating a demilitarized zone along Ukrainian border from Russia's side. I think that many of them will find a lot of excuses why it's against Russia's interests, and that's why it may not be done. But before we go further to like the final part of our discussion, we are already talking for 90 minutes. Thank you so much for your time. Don't forget to like, to share, and to subscribe to this channel. By the way, we are missing 6 subscribers. And when we get them, your votes, your subscriptions, we will cross the benchmark of 5,000 subscriptions. I would be really happy to reach this goal during our live broadcasting with operator Starsky, who is a great person, a soldier, of a veteran of Ukrainian National Guard who fought around Hostomel airport and in other regions in Ukraine, who is a great promoter of Ukrainian interests and ideas, and of ideas and interests of democratic Europe and democratic Western democratic world, because Ukraine fights not only for Ukraine, Ukraine fights for every single person in the free world. And that is unfortunately what Ukrainians have to do, not quite alone, but mostly alone. And that is why we need and we must support Ukraine with everything we can. So like, share, subscribe to Operator Starsky channel, and don't forget to like and share and subscribe to our channel. But look, if we are looking into the future, you have said already you're not a prophet, but you have a hell of a lot of experience and can judge about what can come in the next months. Can Ukraine start another offensive this summer? Or is Ukrainians' goal is to hold the line, exhaust the Russians, and prepare for the next year of the war, which most probably will come?
Russians spent approximately half a year building their defenses on the southern Ukraine, so I believe that we will have to spend approximately the same time to build our defenses in order to make sure that Russians will not break through our defense near Kharkiv, near Donetsk Oblast. That's my rough estimations. But I think it will probably take much more time, because Russians involved a lot of private companies, and unfortunately they have a lot of manpower, and unfortunately they also use the resources that were captured the Russia-occupied territories of Ukraine. That's why they managed to build strong defense lines in roughly 6 months. So apparently it will take maybe a bit more time for Ukraine. Again, I don't know the details about this, but I'm really hoping that this was discussed in terms of the aid for Ukraine. And considering this, I believe that we will probably not see active offensive actions by the Ukrainian defenders around summer, I think for sure. But again, I might be wrong, because that's only something that I can see from my level.
Yes, indeed. And by the way, we have crossed 5,000 subscriptions right now. Thank you so much. And look,
congratulations.
Thank you. 5,001 subscribers. Thank you so much. And Operator Starsky, you have brought us this magic number. Thank you so much. But when we talk like about the situation and all the mood, we know that the Ukrainian society is also experiencing now a debate what to do with the mobilization, the conscription. We have like stories about like people trying to leave Ukraine, or people get conscripted in Ukraine, and it is of course the result of the lack of arms being sent to Ukraine. With the arms and with more protection, with more artillery shells, with more power, the Ukrainian army would have attracted much more people. We have seen it in early 23 when a lot of people voluntarily conscripted because they wanted to be a part of of the offensive. And of course, many people are afraid of being a part of the army when all what this army is doing is sitting in the trenches under Russia's glided bombs. But still, what is the answer for Ukraine in this dire situation when Ukrainian army needs manpower, but not that people are ready to volunteer, and the conscription mechanisms are not that effective, or at least look pretty scary also for the Western countries, which live in peace because Ukrainian army is protecting them?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the problem is not only the manpower, but the machines, because in 21st century we are fighting using machines, artillery, tanks, drones, and things like that. That is something we should consider, because you cannot just bring 100,000 men, in one big line to the front line. It doesn't work like this. We have a doctrine of combined arms. We have to use different machines together with the manpower. I believe that if we have enough necessary vehicles, if we have enough necessary weaponry, then we will be able to fight more efficiently than we do now, because again, a bunch of drone operators can inflict insane damage to the Russian invaders. I believe the recent research showed that 15,000 worth of drones destroyed 65 million worth of Russian equipment over the past month alone. Just think about those numbers. It's insane.
In this context, I'm very thankful to every donor who donated to our drone campaigns that we have raised during the last 14 months. About 400,000 euro for drones for Ukrainian army, observation drones, and the light multifunctional FPV drones. And here I can say that for Germans who are not happy with what Chancellor Scholz is doing, this was one of very understandable and natural ways to express their anger and their fury against Scholz's reluctancy. And we have received donations up to 5,000 euro from a single person with the comments, "I'm not happy what Scholz is not doing, and that is my way to support the Ukrainian army with what I can." And that was also a sign that the German society, as you said already, is much more pro-Ukrainian than our government. Sorry for interrupting you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate what you are doing as well with your team for supplying Ukraine with drones, and what your viewers are doing, because it's absolutely necessary, and at the same time it's absolutely amazing. Well, that's the current situation, because I forgot what I was talking about anyways.
You said about the damage inflicted to the Russian army by the drones, which is much higher than the price of the drones. I'm sorry once again for having interrupted you.
It's okay. It's okay. It's my dementia. I blame everything on it. So we are living in the era of fighting each other with machines. And that's why when we have all the necessary equipment, all the necessary weaponry and artillery we require to win this war, we will win this war. I believe that the guys that are fighting and feeling exhausted, they can continue fighting until we are free, because this is the price that we have to pay. Russians don't have enough motivation to come and kill us. They do have motivation to come to Ukraine and kill people, but this motivation is smaller than our motivation to live. And this is our biggest weapon.
Indeed, and we know that the Ukrainian society has mobilized itself and formed itself in a protecting formation. In the very first days of the Russia's full-scale invasion, we have seen a lot of resistance on occupied territories. We have seen a lot of volunteer movements, and we know that the number of donations, with all the respect and all the words thank you to the Western donors. The Ukrainian society itself has donated much more than any Western society donated for Ukraine. And we know that foundations like Sergei Pritula or Come Back Alive foundations or the others, they raised millions and millions of dollars from within Ukraine, which is not the richest country in the world, but the Ukrainians donated a lot of money for their own army because they understood and they knew very well what happens to them when the Russians prevail. And that is, I think, is a very good sign for everyone in Germany and in the West who says, oh, maybe Ukraine should negotiate with the Russians, maybe give up some territory in exchange for peace. First, there is no peace with Russia because Ukraine has signed already several ceasefire agreements, over 30, I believe, with Russia. The first one was the Minsk agreement, but there were a lot of other ceasefire agreements with Russia. Russia violated them all. Ukraine has signed Budapest Memorandum with Russia, where in both Ukrainian-speaking and Russian-speaking texts, the word guarantees of security was used, not assurances, as an English-speaking text. In Ukrainian Russian texts, the word guarantees was used. Russia has violated that agreement and many others. And we know what is happening with Ukrainians on the occupied territories. There is nothing but humiliation, oppression, erasing of Ukrainian identity, tortures, and executions in the worst case. And my last question, because it's already pretty late in Berlin where you are, it is almost 9 p.m. and I know that you had a very tough day today and yesterday, also a lot of live broadcasting and other things you do for Ukraine. What do you expect from this year in German Ukrainians and Western Ukrainians relations? Will we see something more in understanding, or will we slide back as the United States would say, okay, we have provided you guys 61 billion, we can forget you until after elections, and the Germans would say, oh, and in our case, we have our elections and we are focused on them, and the Americans have already helped you, so you should be happy now.
The recent video I saw from the United States on a YouTube, which was very interesting, and particularly for me, was interview with Johnson. And Mr. Johnson said that the reports of our intelligence, they are very, very concerning, and we are taking those reports seriously. And that's what we can see not only in the United States, but also in Europe, because intelligence provides the politicians, the management of European countries with objective information on what to anticipate from Russia. What exactly they can anticipate from Russia? First of all, it's destabilization, and it's Russia's interference in local elections around European countries and the United States as well. It's informational warfare that will only be increasing because the European and American help to Ukraine is increasing as well. And they understand that nothing changes for better from the Russian, from the Russian side. Nothing ceases, nothing, improves. Russia has a plan which is a completely and purely military plan to take control over post-Soviet territories and to destabilize situation in European and American societies, to the extent that they will be exiting NATO, exiting European Union, and things like that. They know that this threat is very, very real, even though some people still don't realize it. But the governments do, because they have intelligence that brings them those reports, and intelligence doesn't care whether they're good news or bad news. They do their job. Intelligence in Germany absolutely has my respect, by the way, for exposing Russian spies in the IFD. And by the way, a couple of weeks ago, I believe they exposed a Chinese spy in the IFD.
Yeah, that is what one calls diversification. You don't work for one totalitarian regime, you work for several in the case of a revolution or a fall.
Yeah, and of course that totalitarian regime is part of axis of evil, right? I believe that currently the governments can finally see the picture, and they can comprehend this picture. So I believe that Ukrainian and German relations will only improve and keep improving, because our allies finally understand what they are facing in the face of Russia, right? And they are facing the biggest evil since 1945.
Indeed, indeed. And that is also what we can talk about, like Speaker Johnson. There were indications that one of the reasons why he so suddenly changed his mind were his contacts with Ukrainian Baptist churches. And we know that the Russians not only destroy physically Baptist churches in Ukraine, they also kidnap, torture, and kill priests and members of the community. And there were several meetings between Speaker Johnson and representatives of the Ukrainian Baptist community, including one of the priests who has lost his wife and his newborn baby in Russia's military strike. And of course, Speaker Johnson is a politician of that caliber who cannot be influenced significantly by emotions only. But I think it was a very important argument for him when he started to understand, hopefully, what Russia brings. It's not a protector of Christianity or of faith, as Putin always says. Quite the opposite. It's a death cult, and they bring death and suffering to any region where they come. And they hate people like Speaker Johnson, because deep in their hearts they believe that if a person believes in God, he doesn't believe to Russia. One of the readers, Amy Wilke, asks, where have I bought this t-shirt? And this is not a promotion. This came as a question from the audience, and I personally love this brand. I send you the address, Annie. And this is Aviacja Velicini brand. Love their stuff, and I have like, no idea, like 30, 40, 50 pieces of their stuff. Every time I come to Ukraine, I buy it, and it's not the first time I'm being asked. Yes, and now like I stop, because it's not a paid promotion. If I do promotion, I really want some money to be donated for the Ukrainian cause. And it was amazing to see you here, and you have spent over 1.5 hours of your time for this conversation. Operator Starsky, who is a Ukrainian veteran of Ukraine's National Guard, who fought at Hostomel airport defending Kiev in the very first days of the Russian full-scale invasion. And defense of Hostomel was quite a battle, and it was maybe the battle which has effectively destroyed all Russia's plans to occupy Ukraine, because with Hostomel, the gate for Kiev would have been open, and Operator Starsky's National Guard units have stopped the Russians from occupying Hostomel. Thank you for having saved Ukraine and Europe. And don't forget to subscribe to Operator Starsky's TV channel. The username and the link is in the description of this video. don't forget to like, to share, to subscribe to this channel. Visit our webpage and find the ways how we support Ukraine's army and how we raise donations and maybe donate. Why not? And have a great day. Stay on the side of Ukraine and Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All the best. Have a good evening. And once again, stay on Ukraine's side because it is the only side which protects us and which protects Europe. Thank you so much.